I'll introduce our speakers and moderators. So Cedric Brown, he's going to be facilitating our conversation today, and he is a digital marketing specialist, focuses on social justice issues. This with the Advancement Group, and just has a really cool background, tagline, not more than a publicist. Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I love it. And so he's going to be walking us through a conversation with John Johanna with Kind Snacks and Sean Greenwood with Ben & Jerry's. We'll be essentially exploring all of the considerations that organizations are facing while determining whether or not to partake or sit aside for this Facebook boycott. Is anybody not okay with us recording this conversation? Because I want everyone to feel comfortable in asking candid questions and sharing feedback, and I'm happy to stop the recording now, but all right, cool. Well, there is a recording of this, so if anybody from your team or anybody else wasn't able to join, I can share the link with you. So I'll mute myself, and Cedric, I'll go ahead and let you take it away.
All right, Melissa, well, thank you very much. And thank you guys all for making time to join us on this very warm Tuesday, wherever you may be. I know it's warm down here. It's been in close, pushing 100 degrees for like the past 2-3 weeks. And I almost absolutely refuse to go outside for any long period of time. And so while I've had to be staying inside for a bit, I've had the opportunity to scroll on and peruse Facebook and notice how many major brands are not advertising on the platform anymore. So just to give you guys a little bit of context, if you're not familiar, Stop Hate for Profit is a campaign that was called upon by the NAACP and their headquarters. And it's really in reaction to Facebook's refusal to censor or monitor the hate speech and hate-filled advertisements that are coming from the United States President Donald Trump, who is actively working to tear our country apart, essentially by resorting to name-calling tactics and using this paid service to be able to disseminate his message. And so, as a country and really as a world, we're working to build a place that's inclusive of everyone. And, you know, this new political environment, and with Facebook kind of taking a stance to step away from it and monitor it too much, you know, it's allowed all of these messages and this propaganda to really to influence how people see people of color. And so to take a stand, organizations like the NAACP, Unilever Brands, Kind Snacks, I believe Pepsi is involved too, are all taking a stance to not use advertising on Facebook. So what we're going to talk about today is, you know, the decision-making process that brands had to make in this move, where things currently stand, and what are the outcomes we're looking towards for the campaign in general. So Sean and John, we're going to start with this first question. Just give me 1 second here. Just tell us about the decision-making process that you guys had to make to participate in this effort.
You go first, John. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if a lot of you guys know about the history of Kind, but essentially, Daniel Lubetzky, our founder, his father was a Holocaust survivor, and the company, through the kindness of others, through the Holocaust, he survived. And so the name Kind comes from his father's, his personal experiences as well. So this idea of empathy and inclusion is core to who we are. Is that me or is that Sean? Okay, maybe it's Sean. So it's core to who we are as a brand. And I would say we have been pretty vocal on these kinds of issues across the board. It certainly is important to us. We took earlier this year a stance, as an example, on the Equal Rights Amendment. We do a women's equality bar. We did a big push on Pride in New York. We had rainbow lights coming out of New York City at Stonewall, but also supported the Supreme Court amicus. And we've done a lot of public things on this nature. We took Juneteenth off as a day of solidarity as a company for us to reflect on kind of on how to improve ourselves, and also to be able to sort of address some of the challenges we have internally. We're far from perfect. So I'd say this is, it was an easier, I think, decision in some ways, because this is kind of part of the ethos of the brand. However, I would be lying to you to say that given sort of the reliance of brands and marketing on Facebook, in particular Instagram, in terms of our media spend, our business objectives, that it was like, hey, we've got to do this right away. We had a good discussion about like, and sort of this balance of what's the right thing for us to do. And as an example, this is real. Like today we launched, Sean, I'll have to send you one of these. It's our frozen Kind bar. So it's a plant-based treat but typically, and we're working with Anthony from Queer Eye on that campaign, and we're doing some goofy stuff around train burns and drones. But like, the point is, it would have been normally have gone through Instagram, and it was something that we had to, not only as a brand this year, you're sort of looking at, you have the pandemic, you have the disruption in terms of a good disruption, I would say, in terms of Juneteenth and sort of what it's doing to society in terms of causing that creation. But then you're sort of also looking at, wow, like as a marketer, two of the channels that you typically would be using, at least for us, primary channels, you're no longer able to access in a way that you would. But we made the decision to do it. We're proud to be part of that, and we continue to engage, I would say, with particular groups as far as things go. So that's a little bit of the background about us, the history, and why we did it. But I would be lying to you if I would say to you, like, there are lots of campaigns to participate in. I think as any brand, you have to look at, is this something we need to participate, we want to participate, and how can we have the most impact, and what are the implications of it? And I think you're always looking at that. And then for us too, we have the nuances of, we have partners with Mars, as Ben and Jerry's has with Unilever. So you're sort of looking at it from a global lens too. But I'll turn it over to you, Sean.
Yeah, no, and I think it's a very similar story, right? It's a lot about being a kind of values-led organization and saying, the team is aware of what's going on out there in terms of seeing, both what you teed up, Cedric, and what you're talking about, Jonathan, saying there is leadership in our country. There's, actions that are happening that we're not comfortable with, right? And so I think as a company, Ben and Jerry's does take an action on those and does take a stand on those. And whether, we're not a partisan company, and so we don't go out and say, vote Hillary, vote Trump. We do go out and take a stance on issues. And so we'll use the power of our business to say, we don't want, anyone drilling in the Keystone Pipeline area. It shouldn't be done. And so the difference of, again, it not being partisan is we first took a stance on that when Barack Obama was in office, and we put out a post that said, "Dear Mr. President, please act on this." And so I think people are quick to say that, we're just after Trump and are these liberals up in Vermont, which is, true about the liberals in Vermont part at least, but the thought that when we act on these issues, it's because they're issues of concern of ours, right? And so when we, and I'll show some slides in a little bit about a flavor that we did kind of around that concern around the current administration, and we said, we don't want to focus on the negative, so let's focus on the folks who are doing good work around the issues of women and supporting people of color and the environment. And so we worked with groups that way to kind of help design that flavor. And I think the same way, right, as a values-led business, when you need to operate and make decisions in terms of where are you spending your money for marketing, right? And this is a standalone campaign, right? I want to be clear. This was not, Ben and Jerry's is not taking credit for, for the work that was done with the groups that have been involved with this. But we have been partners with a lot of those groups for a long time in working on issues, whether they're around racial justice, equity. Definitely, we've worked with those folks, and so we respect a lot of the players who are really kind of key at the table and who continue to lead the Stop Hate movement. And so as that was kind of continuing to bubble up, our team was looking at it saying, right, we know, like Jonathan's saying, we know we have to spend money as a company, and we know that that's a pretty reliable spend is going to Facebook, going to Instagram, and that companies our size do spend a significant amount there. And so the idea of being able to get into this movement, support the movement, right? Not appropriate it, but just be part of it was, I think, a decision that was not insignificant for us, but it was not difficult in terms of saying we feel like this is the right thing to do.
Well, good job. Sean, if you want to share your slides or
Sure.
can talk about this next question, what were like some of the most relevant pros and cons that you guys had to weigh in making the decision to support the action?
Yeah, let me click on this and then I will.
While Sean brings that up, I just want to remind everyone that you can use the chat feature to ask any questions while we're going through these presentations.
And I'm not going to talk long. I'm going to share a few slides here just to kind of cue it up, right? And I think it does talk a little bit about, what it is that we try to do as a business, right? And so you can see the date there when we kind of issued this first statement around us participating in this. And as we, as I framed up, a lot of it was because of the partners that we work with, NAACP, Color of Change, the ADL, right? Those folks we've done campaigns with before, right? NAACP we've been working with for years. We did back in 2016 a campaign in North Carolina where we're trying to really get into racial equity work. We had some NGOs there advise us of what we could do, and because it was a voting year, we ended up getting involved with voting and basically took an ice cream truck in the state of North Carolina and spent months driving around registering the people to vote, and actually in that process learned a tremendous amount around what happens in terms of race and voting. And so the NAACP folks came in as our partner in North Carolina to help us launch. We did a campaign called Democracy's in Your Hands, and a flavor we launched called Empowerment. And so we took that flavor to the streets to try to scoop out. And in the process of all that, really had this learning through the partner about what it means if you are a person of color and how voting is not as easy, right? And so you can go find a post on our website about the 10 Rorschach ink blot images, or are they gerrymandered districts, right? So it's this image that you see, like, it looks crazy and you go, that can't be a voting district that way. And it's actually, the idea is how things are structured to take away power of people of color by either forcing them all into one voting district or spreading them out so they don't really have power. And then issues like voting that we would learn, if you had maybe a community with 200,000 individuals in North Carolina that was mostly white, you might get 40 voting booths and you go stand in line for 15 minutes and you vote and then you leave. If you're in a same size community of 200,000 people who are mostly black, they might get 7 voting booths. And so you have to spend 6 hours in line and try to, you might have to take a day off of work. And so there's all this learning that comes from working with these partners. And for us, it is based on, again, being a values-led company for us. This is our mission statement. You can find this on our website. I won't spend much time on this, but it's how we see we want to make a great quality product, make a fair return economically, and then be able to be involved with the community in that social mission. And so we take a stance on these issues because we believe in them, right? So the difference is it's not cause-related marketing that you kind of see across that line of blue shapes at the top line. It's not, let's find something that people will care about to advertise on our product, so they'll buy our product. It's the bottom line of the green line saying, what is it that we care about? How do we take a stance that way as a company? And then we bring our fans and hopefully the public along with us to be able to try to realize that progressive change. Right, and we've been doing that for years. Whether, I think Jonathan was just talking right about LGBTQ, that it's not right with where we're at with transparency and authenticity for companies. You can't just say, all right, I do one thing, I save the whales, and that's it. And there are certainly companies that keep a focus, like Patagonia, on the environment, but the idea is you need to practice those values right throughout your company. And so, here's our company Tesla for a Pride Parade that we're supporting. And so, right, an issue like that around supporting the LGBTQ community, we did it 30 years ago because we had a lot of gay employees, and we would say, we want to go out and march with you because you're my fellow worker and I want to stick up for you and support you. That led to us being one of the first companies to provide healthcare benefits to same-sex partners. And now you fast forward 30 years and we put out flavors, we put out campaigns, and we take a stance on those issues, right? We do this because we believe in this and because we do want to try to fight hate. Similarly, when you're looking around these issues around race, right? These are the partners that I'm talking about, right? We're experts in one thing at Ben & Jerry's, and that's making great ice cream. When it comes to issues around race, we try to partner with folks like this, right? It's where Cedric and I met years ago with the Advancement Project, who advised us on our Justice Remixed campaign and flavor that we did. So these are the folks who are the experts, and they bring up our institutional knowledge and our foundational knowledge. And the list that's in there in text are the groups that we are having our employees work on issues in our own office, because Ben & Jerry's is not, immune to systemic bias or implicit bias. It happens, it's everywhere. So we need to practice those things, and we need to take a stance on those, right? And so for us, this work around race and equity started about 5 years ago. December 2015 was that trip to North Carolina, and we posted about, you see there, the following month. We put up this content. We talk about what it is that we learn and how we can try to share that with our fans, and the empowerment flavor that I talk about, right? And then getting involved in these significant movements, because it's not an insignificant thing as a company to be able to sign on to that, right? For us to be able to say, we officially support the Black Lives Matter movement, was a very controversial thing when we did this, 4 years ago. Right, and it's an amazing issue that it is controversial, but where we're at today to be able to follow up with that issue is continuing to take action in these areas, right? So whether it's the vote yes on 4 amendment that was for restoring felons' rights in Florida, whether it's that flavor we talked about called Pecan Resist, there's a plan saying we can resist, we didn't like the way the current administration was supporting women and people of color in the environment. So we had an artist who designed the pint, who was outside of our organization, Fabiana Rodriguez, and we said, can you design it so it represents people of color and women, and not just a white approach to how we put together a flavor. We keep putting up content. That lower left-hand corner is a post that we would do on our website, and you can get on there and find all of that kind of information to continue to come at it, because you need to, as an organization, continue to step into these issues. And we talked about Justice Remixed. About a month ago, after the murder of George Floyd, we put out this statement that has led to a lot of folks, I think, talking about why we took this statement, why were we so straightforward with it. I think there's definitely some discussion we can have around that when we get to question and answers. And since then, right, it's that you don't stop. You don't say, okay, well, we're just going to take a stance now that George Floyd was murdered, and now we can just wipe our hands and say we're done of this. You need to continue to move on that. So you see there, the post on the left is the Defund the Police movement post that we did that you can find on our website. And then it brings us to where we're at today, right? In terms of standing up for Stop Hate for Profit is an opportunity for us to be able to take a stance with our values, make sure that we're supporting those partners that we think are so essential to our success, and to helping inform us on how to take these important issues seriously and how to act on them, because we can't just roll in as a mostly white company in a mostly white state and say, we got this figured out, people, step back, we're going to solve this. That's not how you're helpful in these situations. So I'm going to take a break there and throw it back to Cedric.
Yeah, John, do you have anything you'd want to add?
No, I think you're dead on. This isn't just a PR thing where you make an announcement, you catch onto the bandwagon. It's about, what is the issue you're signing up for? Does it make sense for the brand? And then if you're going to do it, is this something that you're in for the long haul? So I think it's just something to think about as you sort of look at. There are many issues we don't go into. There are certain issues we do. It's a little bit art, a little bit science, but I think it all goes back to, who are you as a company? That slide you had, Sean, was great. It's really about, it starts there, and you can kind of work your way out.
Well, definitely thank you guys both for that. And I got a little bit in my feelings and reminiscent when I saw the Justice Remix playing. So part of what I did when I was at Advancement Project National Office was build up our own webpage to talk about some of the work that Advancement Project was doing at the current time. And, it's been a pleasure to be able to talk about it with new audiences, college students across the country, sharing news about it at recent conferences. So I think it accomplished its mission in getting people to talk more about how we can get justice for some instead of justice for all. I want to move on to what's currently happening with the Stop Hate for Profit campaign. So a couple of meetings have been happening with civil rights groups and Mark Zuckerberg about some of the policies. Unfortunately, these civil rights groups have come away unimpressed, not pleased with Mark Zuckerberg's stance as far as wanting to monitor advertising practices. So I wanted to get your thoughts, John and Sean. How do you think Facebook is handling the response from the campaign in general? And have you guys joined in those conversations with the civil rights groups? And why or why not?
Do you want to?
Go get him, John. I'll follow up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. So we've had indirect conversations just with the groups. We've had direct conversations with groups, but not with Facebook directly. I would say just my perspective on this, and whether it's this issue or 20 other issues, I'm not close enough to know the real discussions internally at Facebook or how engaged they are or what sort of progress. I mean, the key for me is how engaged are they, and are they willing to make some incremental progress, and are they at the table? And that's kind of the big first step for me. So I hate to judge things from the public perspective of like, this meeting didn't go well, or there hasn't been any movement. I honestly don't know. We don't know behind the scenes of like, are they really discussing some substantive change, or is that change going to come in 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks? I think the big thing on all these issues is, are they engaged? Are they taking it seriously? Are they owning or feeling some accountability relative to it, and kind of see how it goes? And I think that's, to me, the more important thing. So I'd hate to judge how are they responding. I'm not in Facebook. I don't know the powers at play. It's not easy to sort of change organizations that quickly. You know, we just don't know. I don't know, Sean, if you want to speak to it. I think we continue to monitor, and obviously we're, you know, but go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I think with any movement, right, it takes time. And so it's hard to go. I think it's understandable when there are issues that come up like the murder of George Floyd, that you say, this is the murder of another human being. We want to see something change now, right? And that's a very understandable reaction. I think when you're talking about trying to change institutions and change systems, it certainly can take some time. And so I think the idea of trying to understand and have some patience around it as a company is a very understandable place to put yourself in. I think, you know, what we, again, our main conduits have been our partners who are at the table, right? So Color of Change is an organization that we've worked with significantly over the last 4 or 5 years, you know, as we've approached racial justice. And so, you know, we've had Rashad Robinson at our company, we've had him at our, you know, franchisee meetings. So we have a pretty tight connection with those folks in terms of how they're influencing what it is that we're trying to do for work around racial justice. And so we respect those folks, right? When he's at the meeting and then he comes out, and I think Jonathan's point is a good one. You can't just read the headline, right? Because we know all the headlines that came out 10 days ago when they had their first meeting was, you know, none of the groups impressed. Zuckerberg's not taking this seriously. That very well may be the place where we're at for now. But we also know that part of this usually is being more entrenched and taking a stance for a while, right? To be able to say this is something important. I think the significant question is what's going on with companies like Kind, like Ben & Jerry's, and others who said, yep, we're taking the month off, is the month is almost done, right? And that's where the next decision and values come in. And I think, again, we've got to give this some time. We've got to be able to see how that shakes out. Part of it is the building pressure, right? It's amazing to think 2 months ago, this was not being discussed at Facebook's very top levels, right? And today we can all rest assured that this is going on, right? They're talking about this at their very top level, saying, what do we need to do? How do we need to act? How do we protect our business? How do we make sure to get people back on board, right? And one of the interesting things is, you know, Ben & Jerry's is seen as an activist company. Our parent organization, Unilever, actually stepped out and said, you know, I think your question subject, like, do you talk with those folks? Unilever spends enough money that they actually have a seat at the table to be able to try to influence some of the behaviors. And because they spend a significant amount of money, it's obviously a pretty important voice when Facebook's making decisions. And so Unilever started off by saying, we're going to hold off on spending money for the rest of the year, right? That's a pretty impressive, you know, in terms of a lot of people will ask us and go, do you think Ben & Jerry's influences Unilever on what we do? It's like, well, they did a pretty impressive job here in terms of the action that they took and the stance that they've taken to be able to say, I think their position is, as a really big company, they feel it's more powerful to stay at the table, to be able to have the conversation, keep the pressure on, and be able to influence it. And I don't want to speak any further because it's definitely Unilever's position, and we definitely have a mutual respect that Unilever speaks for them, and we definitely speak for Ben & Jerry's. So, you know, but I would encourage people, if you haven't seen Unilever's position on it, it's really pretty considerable, and that they are, you know, I think officially not boycotting Facebook and Instagram, but they're saying for now they're holding off on spending money for the remainder of the year. So I think we need to have some patience. We need to have some time and see how those things act. But I think the next challenge for companies like us is, all right, so what are we doing come August?
Sean, you brought up some good points as far as the sphere of influence and how Unilever kind of brings a big name to the table, and with their action to not advertise for the rest of the year, that could be encouraging, or that could signal something to their competitors or other major brands. So I want to know if you guys are involved in recruiting other organizations or other major brands to join this campaign and join this effort.
Yeah, I think for Ben & Jerry's, I think we've talked with some other partners. We've shared what we're doing in terms of that with other businesses. I think, you know, we know that that's part of it for us, right? It's, does Ben & Jerry's spend on Facebook really influence Facebook? No. But does our public position on it as a company that's values led, and then hopefully influencing some other companies, and right, to be able to share, and I think that's one of the things, as you see some of those examples I put up on the slides, to say, you know, 30 years ago, people were scared to say, I support the LGBTQ community. What we're trying to show today is you can do this. It can still be a very positive thing for your business to be able to take stances on these controversial issues, right? And so I think that's part of it. And our, you know, we have a social mission team that's about a half dozen folks that are at corporate office, as well as a few of the folks that are the activism leads on there. And so those conversations continue with both other businesses, other NGOs, to say, here's what we're doing right now. And I think definitely that lifeline back to Color of Change to say, how's this going so far? How can we continue to be supportive?
Yeah, I would say from my perspective, it really is about lending our voice. Daniel's on the board of ADL. We've been engaged with a number of these groups. It's a matter of how can we get our message out, whether you're small, big, medium size, it doesn't matter. There's a great piece in Fortune, and Daniel dedicated time to do some interviews to really talk about you know, sort of the moral decision to do this and why, and sort of the challenges behind it. It's a good piece if you want to check that out. But I think it's for many times, at least for the scale of our business, even though we are global, we are still a small player relative to some of these bigger companies. I think it's about using our strengths to be able to influence change wherever we can.
So John, you talked earlier about your company was launching a major campaign, but based on based on this effort to not advertise on Facebook/Instagram, it definitely influenced that you had to think of alternatives. So for organizations that would like to participate in Stop Hate for Profit, what are some alternative tactics that they could use to get their brand's message across from a PR and communications perspective?
I think, so we're going to take this even a step back from when I talked about it earlier, was this is just a really dynamic time to be in the communications business, period. So I think if you think about changing distribution of product, COVID, how people are experiencing news, how they're experiencing media in the context of racial inequality being at the forefront, and then in sort of some of these channels that are on-off limits, it's been challenging. I won't deny that I probably replanned the back half of this year like 3 times, like literally based on campaigns, timing, shifting time schedules, what that looks like. So I think you just have to find ways to be creative. This first launch that we were going to do for this product had an experiential event in New York. Not going to happen because of anything. So like that had to be pushed by the wayside. It got pushed out because of the context of COVID anyway. It wasn't appropriate at the start of summer. So I think it's a matter of rethinking, what do we need to deliver? What's the right time that's brand appropriate, that you're not, that you're making sure that you're delivering in the right context, and then looking at alternative channels. And that's sort of what we looked at. Some earned media was a little bit our preference on this. Yes, it was with a paid influencer, but that's kind of the approach that we took for this particular Frozen launch. We have a couple of other announcements, which I can't talk about, that are coming in the next couple of weeks. We've had to be creative, and hey, listen, you got to be in the nimble, creative space right now. There's no other way to survive. It just is what it is. I've been in this business for a lot longer than I look, probably, but this is the most dynamic year, and if you're not ready to sort of like, okay, we can't do this, let's figure it out. That's kind of how our team's been, who I've been super proud of, just trying to figure it out. So I don't think there's like a one, hey, you're going to switch to this channel or to this activation, but I think it's really looking at every potential touch point and every potential vehicle to say, like, how can we deliver this based on the time frame?
I was going to jump in and say, I think one of the great things of the movement is there were specific actions called for, right? So if you go to the Stop Hate for Profit website and start to review, what is it that they're asking, Facebook to do, and that as businesses saying that this is important to us, right? So the idea of kind of establishing this civil rights infrastructure position to be able to make decisions, to be able to have third-party review and audits of how they operate their business, right? There are concrete steps there that are being asked of Facebook, and so will Facebook, eventually come to a point where they can take all of those 10 actions? I think that's part of what this group is going to try to keep the pressure on, and that's where we as individuals can continue to lend our voice as individuals, especially as we're using or do it as businesses or NGOs, to be able to get out there and make sure that people are aware. These are the actions and steps that this group is asking to be taken, and this is why they're important.
And I think what's interesting in this one, there are two campaigns happening. There's Stop Hate, and then there are a lot of global companies like Unilever and others that are saying, hey, listen, this isn't Facebook, this is Twitter, this is TikTok, this is like a broader thing. And by the way, it's not 30 days. There is no timetable on this. So you've got almost two movements that are happening at the same time. We're obviously focused on the Stop Hate 30 days piece, but a lot of the global multinationals, as well as other brands, are looking at it more holistically and looking at GARM as an example of progress against. So they're not exactly congruent, but it's just something to be aware of as sort of this plays out, I would say, over the next weeks and hopefully months. And I think my hope is at the end of this, with good strategic engagement, with pressure from brands, with some good resolve on all ends, that there will be winners across the board. This isn't going to be, let's make Facebook the pariah. Hopefully over time that, social media brands will get to a place that people are more comfortable with endorsements of third parties saying, you know what, they've made some significant progress. They've come to the table. They've made these commitments. It's a journey, kind of here's where we are. And my hope is, again, as a non-kind, if we can fast forward October, November, December, that we're going to see this and it's going to be broader than just Facebook, and it'll be other platforms as well. That's my personal non-kind hope on sort of how this transpires versus a very prolonged, painful, thing.
So that kind of goes into the next question I wanted to ask, and then also goes into a question that Melissa has typed in as far as the length of how long this boycott could possibly last. And so how long are each of your brands prepared to boycott this advertising stream, and also to take these other actions on other social media platforms?
I know our teams are still chatting, right? We're definitely working on it now. And I think what we've seen before with campaigns with pressure like this, right, that you apply that pressure, you look for the change. Oftentimes the organization doesn't start the very first time going, oh, okay, thanks, here's all 10 of your actions you're asking for. I think often they start with going, hold on, this is not the way we do our business. We don't want to be forced into changing the way we conduct our business. And so I think it's keeping that pressure on. And I think as the month goes closer, I think there's going to be more pressure for Facebook. And that, again, as business, I know we're having the conversations right now with our team, that our digital team that's leading the work on this, our activism team that is advising on it, goes through and is having daily conversations conversations on how do we go into the next realm of this, what happens. And I think, you know, I'm pretty trustful that we take these actions based on our values. And so it feels to me, if we get to the end of the month and you know, things haven't changed, we're going to make a decision that still is consistent with our values moving forward.
We're in the same place. We're continuing to have conversations. I was on a call actually an hour before this, just about this specific topic. So I don't know how it's going to land the end of the month, but that's, you know, we're seeing where things go.
Gentlemen, both thank you. And so based on the lessons that both your brands have taken and the civil rights organizations are taking against Facebook, what are some key, what's the main advice that you would give to companies that want to take concrete actions against injustice? And this is also specific to a question that is in the chat. There's a B Corp that heavily relies on Facebook ads. And so they want to know, or just in general, what would you encourage them to do as far as making this decision to take a stand?
I jump in and say one thing is that, you know, we haven't deleted our Facebook account. We haven't stopped some organic posts. So I think, you know, in terms of the question, if there's a B Corp that relies on that, I think you can still try to, you know, keep your account there, do some organic posting. And I think to be able to utilize that and share even on that platform to say, hey, this is really important to us, right? If you're incorporating the values of being in a B Corp, to say, you know, this idea of stopping hate is a pretty easy one for people to get a hold of, right? Even though what we see in terms of the system and the structure, the way that Facebook has been taking money, doesn't support that. So I think to be able to be vocal and be verbal around that, to be able to continue to put that out, I think that's a good opportunity for whether you're a small B Corp business or you know, you're the size of businesses like Jonathan and myself.
Yeah, I hear you though. It's tricky because digital and social are under me as well. You know, if I posted just an organic, I'm going to reach like 6 people. Yeah. So if they're really looking to really drive their business, I mean, those are the challenges we have. I think it goes back to what Sean had on that slide, is like, how core is this to the ethos of your company, your team members, your associates? How important is this to you? And I think you have to find ways to creatively overcome that from a marketing perspective. Now, that said, right now we're at day number 21 of this. I'm not a fortune teller, so I can't tell you if this is going to go on for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, or if it's going to be ended the end of the month and then reconnected 2 months later. I don't know. But I think it's all the things that you weigh out, whether it's this issue or in my previous life on animal welfare or on other environmental issues, whatever it might be. It's sort of weighing out. You can't do everything, but this one's a pretty big one for us. I know it is for Sean. It's just really, I don't know what brand you're talking about. I think it goes back to that piece of it more than anything. And there's been some hybrid decisions. I mean, there was a good piece, I think, on Disney most recently, and Walmart in the Wall Street Journal, speaking about how they didn't join the campaign, but they definitely pared back significantly, unless I got this wrong, on their spend as well. Did I get it wrong? But I think this was yesterday's. So there's been some hybrid positions, but we know there's companies that are definitely on the forefront. There's ones that are paring back. But to me, it's like, if you're going to pare back, you might as well commit. That's sort of like there's no point being half there.
John, you bring up a good point. I remember when I was at Advancement Project back in March, there was a significant decline in organic engagement on Facebook. And so it's kind of a shame that the platform is ultimately starting to become a pay-for-play type of communications medium. And so if you have the money and you're withdrawing it, it's definitely going to hurt Facebook's pockets, but it could also hurt the way you have to communicate with audiences too. But I mean, it's for a worthy cause. We're taking a stand against injustice. Yeah. And so some things are worth, compromising your bottom line. And so now we can get into some of these audience questions, and everybody feel free to participate.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, this is a small group. We should just have kind of fun and have a conversation. So
right.
Sean, tough questions.
Yeah, we've got a couple minutes here. So if you want to submit your question, if you want to talk through your question too, that's great. So let's take this first question from Jenna. Do you feel like it'll be a compromise of your company's values if you resume ads when nothing has changed?
This is just my personal non-kind view. I'll sort of give you this piece of it is, listen, I think there's a lot of ways they can play out this campaign. They could say they got the attention of a ton of brands and say, listen, we're going to give 90 days for some behind the scenes stuff to happen and then re-put on pressure. That's one approach. Well, another approach they could have is they just go full court press until something changes. You know, both of them are worthwhile. At the end of the day, I think the goal is create some long lasting change that people can feel good about. And so it's just a matter of, again, it goes back to what does the engagement look like in these conversations I'm not currently in. I don't think there's a right or a wrong. I think this 30 days did what more than I could have ever even anticipated. I'm so pleased personally, as well as the brand, that we're part of something this big, that's grown so big, that's big, way bigger than us, exponentially, that, you know, is joining on something to change society in this way. So I don't think there's a right or wrong. I just don't know. I'm not in charge of the campaign. Sean's not in charge of the campaign. There's plenty of ways to war games and play this out if they really want to put pressure on. I just don't know what path they're going to pick.
Yeah, and I think in given time, you might see other businesses still choose to join up, right? You might
Correct.
see some, like when this is based in racism and hate, to say, right, I think when you look, it's a little bit of the Black Lives Matter movement today. 5 years ago, were as many people engaged and aware of that? You know, in terms of the statement we put out saying we want to dismantle white supremacy, we couldn't have put that statement out 5 years ago. We were not that aware of the situation and able to have taken actions in the meantime that would lead us to that point of where we were able to make that statement recently. So I think in terms of, like Jonathan's saying, the fact that this has made an impact already on Facebook. There's undoubtedly that Facebook is paying attention to this right now. Will it lead to the full list of what the actions are that have been asked? That time will tell, right, in terms of how we see that shake out. But I think what we're seeing today is that people are taking to the streets. They are acting. I think more and more businesses are willing to jump into those issues that they wouldn't have necessarily gotten involved with before. And so to be able to keep that pressure up as organizations, I almost think back to the previous question around the small B Corp, to say, this may hurt my business, and to put it out publicly as a business, say, I do a lot of advertising on Facebook that's very economical for me. I'm going to choose not to do this, and I want to let those folks know who can support me as a business, because I'm going to do this because I believe in dismantling hate and racism. And to be able to do that, and then find hopefully some of that group that's also taking the same action, to be able to help team up with them and move to be able to move the needle on the issue while you can still keep your business hopefully positive that way. That feels like that's an opportunity.
Gentlemen, thank you. Let's go on to our next question. Has there been any public reaction to your brands taking this stand? And how have your customers responded? Have they noticed?
For us, I can tell you, I saw the recent reports just from a social perspective, just at looking in terms of what we did for Pride, as well as more recent announcements. It's been positive. It's in alignment with exactly where we'd expect it to be. But honestly, we didn't do it for that reason. We mostly, I would say, if it came down to it, we mostly did it for ourselves. We're like, this is important to our team members. This is an important issue for us to take a stand on. How are we going to feel about this from a moral perspective in terms of who we want to be, and how do we create the best kind that we possibly can? That's how we judge this. It was never about impressions or comments. And in fact, any of these campaigns we've done, and I referenced even the equality, the heroes, the Pride specialty products that we do in terms of leaning into issues, it's never been mentioned. We don't judge it based on that. It's really about how do we express our values in a way that we feel good about. And frankly, in this business, if people aren't criticizing you, you've probably said nothing. So you got to expect that. It's just, you just want to make sure that it's sort of aligned with kind of who you are as an entity.
And it's definitely, I think your point, Jonathan, in terms of you don't want it to be about you, right? As the business, it's great that, like, you know, when our team put out the dismantling white supremacy statement, it was not a press release. It was on our own website and our own digital channels. And I think, you know, we started weighing in other issues that came up shortly after, which are, how do you stay consistent on those values when things came up like defunding the police, you know, the Stop Hate campaign? Do you say, let's put another big statement out there and try to make this front page news and have everyone talking about it? I think we want to stand with the people in the movement. We want to shine the light on that movement and use the power of us as a business to do that. But we don't want it to say to people, hey, look at us. Look, we're trying to do something good. That doesn't help anybody, right? And I think in terms of transparency and authenticity today for businesses, when you do take a shallow stand that way without some actions behind it, right, you're called out on it pretty quickly, right? I think we've seen a lot of that in the last couple months of businesses posting a statement that says, we stand with our black and brown sisters and brothers at this difficult time. And it's like, well, if you do, what are you doing about it? What's your action? And why haven't you acted on this before, right? Where are you taking a stance and actions that are authentic to your business? And I think, you know, that was part of the thought, I think, in some of these follow-up actions after the murder of George Floyd, that we put that big statement out, and we had talked about saying, you know, do we position defund the police as another major statement that we go out and do a big push? Is it consistent with our values, right? We've been operating with this idea on racial justice issues of invest and divest, of saying, where do we try to move the resources and the money, that's what counts, to be able to do the work that we believe in. That's been a part of our work the last 4 or 5 years on that same racial justice issue. And so this idea around, you know, Stop Hate for Profit, that is one that you go, let's get into it, let's be able to support it.
And the one last point on this, we use these things also as a way to get better. I mean, I will tell you, it's fostered more conversations internally about things that need to be improved or for ourselves. And I personally, like, look, I like work, but this to me is more meaningful of how do you see yourself leaning into issues and having real impacts. And so it's like, anytime we do this kind of thing, it's sort of, how are you taking this home? How are you taking this to your families? How are you sort of looking at it as your team members, so that we can be better people, better company, sort of, and project ourselves outwards? There's no question we all have vulnerabilities on all of these issues, and it's sort of, how do we improve?
Yeah, and that we're not perfect, right? There are definitely, I mean, we have our own work going on right now that we're doing. I showed you folks in the slides in terms of racial issues inside, and looking at how do we address that within our own company, and then how do we still take these issues that are consistent with our values externally and be able to support those.
All right, guys, we had 2 more questions to get through, and then I have to turn it back over to Melissa. So this next one is from Linda. We talked about how this is impacting your relationship with customers, but what about your employees? How are you guys getting them engaged and getting them on board?
I think with our employees, it's, you know, it's a little bit similar to what Jonathan's talking about. When you take that stance as a company, they say, this is the right stance for us. Thank you for being active this way, right? And really, for any of the actions we've done in the last couple months, I think as there's been kind of this heated spotlight and kind of the pressure cooker has been turned up around racial justice, that our employees like, yeah, we should be getting involved in this. I remember before we put out our Dismantle White Supremacy ad or statement, that employees were like, oh, this is terrible. What are we doing? There's another need here. This issue is happening. What do we do to act, right? And so the team was able to get together and then put some ideas in place and say, okay, here's how we're going to respond to that. And I think in all of these situations, it's, how do you operate in your values and support the movement and try to be positive to it? Again, in this specific campaign, because it's not ours, you know, we want to make sure we're not appropriating their campaign. We don't want people to think that Ben & Jerry's going, hey, we came up with this great idea. Here's a campaign, it's called Stop Hate for Profit, and we want you to support it. So we want to make sure that we're not being seen that way, that we do want to hold up and talk about those organizations that we've worked with that are important to us before. Let them, you know, we actually had a number of interview requests that came in after we took the stance in terms of supporting this campaign. And in talking with Color of Change, we said, can we send those requests to you? So when some of the, you know, often many of the media that called said, we'd like to talk to some at Ben & Jerry's about this statement, we said, we've made our statement, we're out there supporting this campaign. We would like to put you in touch with Color of Change to talk with them, because they're the ones doing the real work on this and they should be able to speak about it.
Yeah, I know you have another question. I would just say that there's been heavy team member engagement on this throughout, not just on this policy, but on Juneteenth. Us taking that day of solidarity was pretty awesome, just personally, and just being able to have conversations you typically would never have openly, and using that as a day of reflection and support, I think was pretty phenomenal. So that's been going on for several months now at the company.
Great. And let's get our last question in. Comes from Freya. Now, we've talked about B Corps not advertising, but what about nonprofits that use their ads to promote their free programs and services to people who are affected by a disease or a specific issue? What advice would you give to them as far as using Facebook ads?
I think if you have to use Facebook because it is as effective a tool, maybe you add a post into your Facebook account, or maybe you have a disclaimer on the Facebook account that says, we're reaching out to you. We need to for this good or service that we provide, but we want people to be to understand we're aware of this campaign that's going on. We support the idea of stopping hate and stopping racism moving forward. We are encouraging, and maybe it allows them to take an action. Right? So I think one of the issues we have definitely heard a lot since we've been doing the work the last couple months is people will say, because it's rooted in action, and because for years we've been taking a stance on, criminal justice reform or restoring, returning citizens who've done their time in prison to restore their voting rights, doing racial justice work before. Because you have some of that action, people are much more likely to listen to what you have to say and consider supporting you. So if it's that nonprofit business, maybe they put out a statement and take some action around it and say, we're going to continue to use the service, but we want people to be aware that we hopefully can do something still while using the service to be able to combat racism and hate.
This one's a tough one for me. It's like, do you kill someone because of COVID information, or are you race or sort of like how do you compromise, or the two very competing interests that you have? It's hard to know without knowing the nonprofit. I'm not saying I don't know the situation at all. It's a very, very challenging one. It sounds like that's their free channel and only channel for communicating. Is that correct? Yeah.
Or you can jump in here.
Hi, sorry, I was just taking myself off mute. It's Freya. It's our most engaged channel. So I think for us, of course, when you're a nonprofit, you or a charity, is you lead with your values. And so for us, I think what's tricky is wanting to lead with our values, but also making sure that we can stay, particularly at this time when we have some more limited channels in terms of what's happening with COVID, but also we also have very small budgets, and most people who engage with us are on Facebook. And so how do we make sure that we're getting the word out and letting people know how to access our programs and services and find us while still being kind of very respectful about what's happening, and again, leading with what our brand and what the organization principles were built around.
Yeah, I think if you could put a statement out for you that says, here's our belief, and we want to fight hate and racism like everybody. We need to use this service because it's the most economical and works for us, but we want to be clear and we want to take that stance. Maybe you ask every one of your employees to say, post that on your own personal Facebook and send this message out to say, this supports our organization, but we are aware of this. We want to try to see, maybe you look at that list of 10 actions that the groups come up with, and you can focus on one of those and say, here's the one that we are going to really ask Facebook to push forward. And it allows you to still be able to do that and take some action as a company and as individuals in that company to feel good.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for the question, Freya. Well, gentlemen, John, Sean, it's been great chatting with you all, and thank you for everybody for joining in. I'm going to turn it over to Melissa now, who has some closing thoughts, and we're looking forward to keeping Impact Relations engaged. So, Melissa.
Thanks for everyone for joining, and our speakers and our facilitators. That was a great conversation. Just wanted to encourage feedback from anybody who called in and joined today. We have done these before. We started these right when COVID started, and we had a few different topics. I think one of the most pressing questions that the impact relations community had was how or when to resume marketing communications efforts that aren't pandemic related. They didn't want to seem insensitive, so we had a really meaty conversation about that. This one has been really great, and we've got some other, you know, potentially confrontational or challenging moments ahead with voting rights, voter suppression. Should a brand get involved in that? The economy is reopening in different areas of the world, in different areas of the country, and we've got an economic downfall underway and happening. So there's lots of different things that you might be curious about how to consult your client on, how brands should get involved. So we would love to hear from you what topics you'd like to explore in these meetups. Please feel free to either drop it into the chat or shoot Jenna an email who you RSVP'd with, and we're always open to your feedback as well. And thank you so much for your questions and joining the conversation.
Thanks for facilitating, Cedric. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care.
Yeah, stay safe.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cool.
Take care.